Hello, thank you for coming. My name is Doron Peisic. I'm a PhD researcher at Tel Aviv University's School of Philosophy, and I'm working on dreams, mostly lucid dreaming and hypnagogia. I'm also a practitioner of hypnagogia, and I create collage art based and inspired from hypnagogic images. And this will be a mixed session. We will start with a presentation, then we will do a short practice of hypnagogia. Afterwards, I will ask you to draw a quick sketch of a certain aspect from your experience, and I will collect those sketches for further research. And finally, we'll do a Q&A. So hypnagogia is a liminal state, a transitory state between wakefulness and sleep. It is right on the verge of sleep onset, but usually we tend not to pay too much attention to it. But if we will bring awareness to the point and transition and process of falling asleep, then we will notice these quasi-hallucinatory phenomena, both visual, auditory, and somatic. For example, when we close our eyes, we will see colorful clouds, then becoming kaleidoscopic patterns and geometric forms, then becoming faces, landscapes, scenes, and eventually developing into somewhat of half dreams or a dream-like state. And while hypnagogia is mostly visual, we can sometimes also hear random sentences being said, sometimes in unknown languages, or strange noises coming from around the room. And on the bodily sphere, we might feel the sensation of floating or becoming bigger or smaller, or certain jolts and vibrations throughout the body. And the art of hypnagogia is actually the art of maintaining conscious lucid awareness throughout this process. Is both a contemplative practice and a spiritual practice. It is contemplative in the sense that we can learn more about our own psyche through this unique threshold symbolism that appears in hypnagogia, which is quite different, as we will see, from dream imagery and dream symbolism. And it is also a spiritual practice in the sense of learning to let go of the waking world, of our physical bodies and ego, and releasing ourselves to this kind of void in which unexpected events can occur. And it also opens up the big questions, as I call them, of what is consciousness and what are the limits of consciousness. So the term hypnagogia was coined by Alfred Maury. He was a 19th century French physician, and it comes from the Greek hypnos for sleep and agogeus, meaning a leader, a guide or conductor, the state leading to sleep. In 1865, he published the book Sleep and Dreams, in which he theorized that hypnagogic hallucinations, as he called them, exist on a continuum with full-fledged dreams, and that they are triggered by somatic sensation and external stimuli. The most iconic dream of Maury that he based his theory on, and also a dream that he had in his youth as he was taking a nap, is the guillotine dream, and it reads, can you hear me from here? Yeah, okay. I am judged, condemned to death, taken in a cart amidst an enormous crowd to the square of the Revolution. I ascend the scaffold, the executioner binds me to the fatal board, he pushes it, the knife falls. I feel my head being severed from my body. I awake seized by the most violent terror, and I feel on my neck the road of my bed, which had become suddenly detached and had fallen on my neck as would the knife of the guillotine. This happened in one instant, as my mother confirmed to me. So this dream, later quoted and analyzed by Freud, also inspired Salvador Dali's famous painting, Dream Caused by the Flight of a Bee Around the Pomegranate a Second Before Awakening. As Dali himself wrote, as a bar might fall on the neck of a sleeping person, causing them to wake up, and for a long dream to end with a guillotine blade falling on them, The noise of the bee here provokes the sensation of the sting, which will awaken Gala, his wife and muse. Dali was also known for utilizing the hypnagogic state for creative inspiration. He would fall asleep holding a key in his hand, and immediately upon losing consciousness, he would drop the key, then wake up and quickly try to sketch and capture the unique threshold images that he saw in hypnagogia. We can also see through this painting the unique, well, it gives us a way to understand this unique form of symbolism. We start with the flight of a bee around a pomegranate that we can see in the left edge of the painting. Then the bee's movement around the room becomes a swimming fish. Its buzzing, growing stronger, becomes a growling tiger. Its nearness to Gala becomes a pouncing tiger, and eventually its sting becomes a bayonet. We can also see that there is actually a double representation of the pomegranate in this painting. One very small next to Gala's body, perhaps indicating the true, well, not the true, but the waking life location of the pomegranate. And then the left one is the dream equivalent of this same pomegranate. So it depicts beautifully, this painting, the logic of the hypnagogic state. Another figure, contemporary of Maury, was Marquis d'Hervé de Saint-Denis. He was a French sinologist and dream researcher who coined the term lucid dream, rêve lucide, in his 1867 book, Dreams and the Ways to Direct Them, Practical Observations. Freud wrote that he couldn't get a copy of this book, and we can only imagine an alternative history of psychology in which the foundation for healing the psyche is actually lucid dreaming. Saint-Denis began keeping a dream journal as a teenager in order to paint his dreams. Over time, he started becoming more lucid in his dreams, aware to the fact that he's dreaming, and could also direct them voluntarily. His ideas on the role of memory and active imagination in dreams directly challenged Maury's work, who was very influential at the time. And of course, since he had so many lucid dreams, he could not really believe that dreams are just the result of physical sensations. Saint-Denis also wrote on the hypnagogic state, noticing how abstract forms, those that we see with our closed eyes, would continually transform into dream images. And he gives many examples, but this is one. White smoke seems to blow across like a thick cloud driven by the wind. Flames burst out of it intermittently, so bright that they hurt my eyes. Soon they have absorbed the cloud. Their brilliance is softened, they whirl and spiral, forming great plumes, black in the center and red turning to orange towards their outer edge. After a moment, they open out in the center, now forming a thin golden ring, a sort of frame in the middle of which I see the portrait of one of my friends. Now, above we can see illustrations from the book's cover depicting those hypnagogic forms that we see with our closed eyes, perhaps painted by Saint-Denis himself. Just for comparison, these are sketches I collected from previous workshops I conducted in Tel Aviv, in which I asked the participants to try and capture these forms, and they all try to convey in different yet somehow also similar ways this ever-changing movement and transmutation of these forms. Moving to the 20th century, Herbert Silberer was a Viennese psychoanalyst who published a paper in 1909 on the concept of autosymbolic phenomena, auto in the sense of self, describing how images perceived in hypnagogia symbolize one's own current physical or mental state, thus integrating both Maury's and Saint-Denis's perspectives. These symbols arise from the interaction of two opposing forces, drowsiness and the effort to think. And based on his experience with hypnagogia, he proposed three categories to try and understand these phenomena. The first is material or content phenomena, representing ideas, thoughts, or judgments that we have while falling asleep. And he gave an example. My thought is, I am to improve a halting passage in an essay, and the symbol which appeared, I see myself planning a piece of wood. And the second category is functional or effort phenomena. Effort is in the sense of effort against falling asleep. It represents the mode of functioning of consciousness, for example, quick, slow, easy, difficult, etc. Example, I am thinking about something. Pursuing a subsidiary consideration, I depart from my original theme. Symbol, I am out mountain climbing. The mountains near me conceal the farther ones from which I came and to which I want to return. And the third category, resonating Morris theory, is the somatic phenomena, representing the physiological conditions such as temperature, pressure, bodily position, tension, acoustic, optic, etc. Example, I take a deep breath, my chest expands. Symbol, with the help of someone, I lift the table high. So unfortunately, Silberer couldn't further develop his model and theory because he committed suicide at the young age of 40 after being rejected by Freud and his circle. But now he is considered a rediscovered thinker, and there is a growing interest in his writing. Focusing more on the aesthetic aspect of hypnagogia was George Trumbull Ladd. He was an American psychologist. Wait one second. Okay. He was an American psychologist, educator, and philosopher who was among the first to introduce the study of experimental psychology in America. He conducted both self and group experiments with his students in hypnagogia, focusing on the phenomenon of retinal light, the light which we see with our closed eyes, even and especially in the dark, which he referred to as Eigenlicht, from the German Eigen, own, and Licht, meaning light, one's own light. And they practice visualizing forms and maintaining them in this inner light. He trained himself to awaken without opening his eyes just minutes after falling asleep, allowing him to compare the fading retinal impressions with the dream images still present in memory. He proposed that an internal relationship exists between the two. So, when we close our eyes, we don't actually see pure black. Rather, we see this kind of gray that we can call Eigenlicht or Eigengrau, one's own gray. And we can think about it like the canvas of consciousness upon which all dream imagery is being projected. But the thing is that the more we look at this color, we start realizing that actually these are many different colors. Some of them, or most of them, are very difficult to name, and they are in constant movement, and they shift in unexpected patterns. And then as we start going asleep, drifting away from the waking world, we might find ourselves, if we keep this kind of receptive, passive awareness, and entering the void that is as if all around us. And drifting away from the sensation of the physical body, we find ourselves floating in this void. Again, keeping our awareness, we can get to the point of seeing sudden flashes of landscapes, appearing and disappearing, or faces or things, and this perhaps resonates with what Silberer called autosymbolic phenomena, if we are able to see the relation between these images and what is our current mental and physical state. And then after a while, we get a sense of depth and directionality in this void, as if we are going through something, maybe towards a tunnel, or alternatively, maybe something comes towards us and we are about to enter it. And then again, we are drifting away from the physical body, and if we stay in this state, consciously and lucidly, we get into this three-dimensional dream space with our dream body, in which we start to identify with the dream scenario. So this process, starting from identifying and feeling the physical body in bed, then moving into this flat canvas of consciousness, this Eigenlicht, then becoming void, and the more we drift away, it starts to become a three-dimensional dream space in which we have a dream body. If we are able to maintain awareness and lucidity throughout this process, we can learn a lot about our own consciousness and maybe redefine the limits of what consciousness is. The Art of Hypnagogia I believe, is actually something that has to include art. Hypnagogia can be a theme for art, like we saw in the case of Dali, but also documenting our experiences, our dream and hypnagogic experiences in art is a way to touch on these very subtle nuances that words mostly fail to convey. These experiences are very abstract, and I believe that artistic expression can educate and inform all other fields. I'd like to go towards the conclusion of the presentation part with a pattern of embodiment that I noticed in previous workshops, and I call it the dissolution of proprioception. Proprioception means the perception of the body as a whole, as well as its parts, and also it comes from the Latin word proprius, cognate of property, which has the sense of body ownership. So what I noticed when I asked participants in previous workshops to draw their physical body as they were in Hypnagogia, I mean, they drew it afterwards, I noticed very similar patterns that you can see, for example, depicted from above, from the center to the left. The body is not one big mass anymore, rather it is like different locations of gravity and sensation, and the sense of the body as a full unit is no more. And also on the right side, depicted from the side, you can see these very thin lines or blurriness that shows that dissolving the body's boundaries. So this suggests that actually the process of falling asleep is not like a binary situation in which we go immediately from sleep to dream and there's nothing in between, but rather it is more like a graded spectrum in which we can have various experiences that are interesting to research. One of them that I personally had a lot of, and also I found in the literature, is a situation where I felt and identified with both my dream body in the dream space and the physical body in bed at the same time, which is quite an enigma. And also, as I said, it's in the literature. I'll give one example. This is by Frederick van Eden. He was a Dutch psychologist and novelist, also one of the first Westerners to write about lucid dreams, a contemporary rival of Freud, exactly because psychoanalysis just developed without acknowledging lucid dreaming at all. And he writes, "I dreamt that I was lying in the garden before the windows of my study and saw the eyes of my dog through the glass pane. I was lying on my chest and observing the dog very keenly. At the same time, however, I knew with perfect certainty that I was dreaming and lying on my back in my bed. And then I resolved to wake up slowly and carefully and observe how the sensation of lying on my chest would change into the sensation of lying on my back. And so I did, slowly and deliberately, and the transition, which I have since undergone many times, is most wonderful. It is like the feeling of slipping from one body into another, and there is distinctly a double recollection of the two bodies." So this kind of unique experience of having a double body or double consciousness brings up again these big questions, as I call them. What is the space in which one can feel both the dream body and the physical body in bed at the same time? Is consciousness truly a physiological phenomenon, or rather is it more like a non-local field or a space in which we tend to identify with this body or another? And then it, of course, opens up the questions about relation to other states, like out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, and the big question of the potential existence after the death of the physical body. So what are the limits of consciousness? And with this open question, we will move into the practice, and afterwards we do the Q&A.